Bem-vindos, bem-vindas. Dou as boas-vindas também ao nosso convidado dessa semana, Amidror, um empreendedor de tecnologia e educação em Israel, com atuação também no terceiro setor. O AMI se destacou em 2023 nas manifestações contra a reforma do judiciário, que levaram multidões às ruas, como nós acompanhamos. Chegou a dar uma entrevista aqui para o Instituto Brasil-Israel na ocasião. Lembro que, através desse QR Code que tem na sua tela, você pode fazer sua contribuição com o IB para que o IB continue promovendo o diálogo. Amy, welcome. Thanks for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Amy, on Saturday, March the 16th, once again, protesters gathered in Tel Aviv calling for the release of hostages and for early elections. Is this movement getting stronger?
Yes, this movement is getting stronger and stronger every day. I actually wish we would not need it. Hopefully the government would do what they had to do without us. But it is getting stronger because in the last couple of months, most people thought that, especially after October 7th, the government will start doing what's good for Israel. And sadly, they are disappointed again, and they understand that there need to be pressure in the streets, plus the international pressure to force the Israeli government to do what's right.
Unlike the previous weeks, the police brought horses to disperse the demonstration in Tel Aviv last Saturday, and once again, water cannons were used. How do you see the way police forces are dealing with the rallies?
Well, you know, the Minister of Internal Security, which is the Minister of Police, is Itamar Ben-Gvir. He's a convicted terrorist. And even without saying it, he influences the police to try and stop the protests and the rallies. I do give credit to the police officers that actually understand that their job is to both protect the protesters and also, you know, to prevent events that are not safe as well. So they are, in the last weekend, they actually did fairly reasonable work. They did allow us to protest, but it is a very fragile line because while the police officers normally understand the situations, a lot of the young police officers don't. So, what makes it even more complicated is that in many cases we are protesting with the families that their loved ones are in Gaza. So it is a very complex situation, also for the police. But for us as protesters, we don't really care. You know, we want to get the hostages back. We want Israel to run the country and the war as a reasonable country. And, you know, more water cannons or less water cannons, more horses, less, it's almost meaningless for us.
So you are taking part, you are part of the demonstrators.
Definitely.
And are you becoming a political force? Can you say that?
We are influencing the political system in a massive way, but we are actually not a political force. What's interesting about the entire protest movement in Israel is that the people that come to protest, they have slightly different political opinions. There are people that are more on the right and more on the left, people that are more religious, people that are more secular. We all protest together for the same goal. Therefore, to try to put us in one bucket and say this is one political movement is not right. But because of our ability to rally people in such a massive way, every political player in Israel, every party, are paying close attention to everything that we're doing, and want our blessing in some cases, or want to attack us in other cases. So we are not a political party, but we are very strong political influence.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is going to Israel, to the region, to the Middle East once again this week. It's going to be his 6th a wartime trip to the region. And of course, he does that as mediators in Qatar discuss a possible pause in fighting. Are you optimistic about a hostage deal?
It's definitely related to the U.S. A couple of the United States asked Benny Gantz to come to the U.S. This was despite the fact that Netanyahu didn't want him to fly. And what Gantz heard there was that the United States are taking over. The views from northern Gaza, the malnutrition crisis over there, and the failed promises of the Israeli government forced them to take control. And we see it with the fact that they are parachuting food into Gaza. We see that they are building a harbor in Gaza. And we see the immense pressure on both the Israeli government and the Qatari government to actually get to a deal. So I think in the last, probably this week, it's the first time I'm optimistic, because from now on, the Israeli government is not in control anymore. It is the US government and the European Union that actually taking control over the events. And they're doing it with diplomatic power, with financial power, with military power, and Israel will have to comply. And if Netanyahu's government will fail to comply, it puts Israel among a very questionable list of countries that disobey the UN Security Council resolution and stuff like this. So yeah, I'm actually optimistic for the first time, because I know our failed government is not really managing the process.
And Bibi Netanyahu has agreed to send an Israeli team to Washington to discuss plans for Rafah. And the U.S. government is very concerned about an eventual military operation in Rafah, right?
Well, it's more dramatic than that. Israel announced twice already that the government approved the army plans for the operation in Rafah. They announced it for the first time like a month ago, and the last time a week ago. And what's happening is actually that the U.S. are saying to Israel, come to the U.S. We also want to approve your plans. And it directly links to what I just said before. The U.S. took control over the entire process from both ends. And the operation itself in Rafah, like Rafah needs to be clean for Hamas. I'm a very big supporter of it. You know, we cannot allow terrorists to walk around free. We need to find them, and we need to try to find each one of the hostages. So the operation in Rafah is needed, but it needed in the terms, in reasonable terms, that the U.S. and the rest of the world are trying to force on Israel. So it's not that the world is saying to Israel, don't catch the Hamas terrorists. They never said it. They said it, and they say, you definitely should and have to catch all the Hamas terrorists or kill them. But at the same time, you need to work to start rebuilding Gaza as a Hamas-free state, territory, whatever you want to call it. And this is something that Israel didn't do. The Israeli government, only from political reasons, which are Netanyahu's political reasons, nothing to do with the reality, and it's hurting us. We are losing soldiers, and our hostages are dying in prison, mainly because the Israeli government is driven by political forces and not for what's right for the war. So the US, they're just saying, okay, we understand that you cannot control the situation anymore. You will have to approve everything by us. And that's what you will see right now in the US and also in the visit in Israel.
It's interesting because we do perceive increasing diplomatic pressure coming from the US upon Prime Minister Netanyahu, and also internal political pressure in Israel upon him. And according to the polls, most Israelis do want early elections. How likely or unlikely are they?
I believe the elections will be before the end of the year. It's almost unavoidable. Between 75% to 80% of Israelis wants the election, and they want to see the people that brought us this crazy massacre out. Literally, they want, like, we want all of them to be out, from the army to the security forces to Prime Minister Netanyahu, which is like the main responsible, and to all his government. It's unavoidable. Now, you're saying political pressure or diplomatic pressure on Israel from the US. I think this is understatement. This is what we had for the previous 5 months. What you see now is that the US took over. This is not a political pressure anymore. It's much, much more harsher, and it's much more aggressive. And this is after the Israeli government failed 3 times to deliver what they promised to the US. So it's the term diplomatic pressure is a total understatement to what's going on right now. Is that they are in charge.
And of course, well, there is an electoral process going on in the US, and whatever happens in Israel, whatever happens in the Middle East, it is affecting or will affect the ballots, right?
Oh, totally. Like the timeline is not related to Israel. The timeline is related to the US election. The promise, like the first promise that Israel gave the American administration was 6 weeks of war. Then they say we need some time until like January 1st. Then they said until Ramadan. So the US gave Israel and the world, actually, it's not only Israel. We got like a full blanket from the European Union and all that to do the work for 5 months. And then when Israel failed to achieve it, by the way, not because of the war could have ended long time ago. It's purely political. Then they had to change gears, and therefore those elections are almost unavoidable. There might be different paths going there. There might be a situation when the racist parties, the extreme right, they leave the government, and somebody else comes in, and you can have like a transition government, and then it will delay the elections a little bit. But clearly, the timetable in the US determines everything. Because if Biden have elections by November, before the elections, he needs to show that the war ended. He needs to show that the hostages were released. And he needs to show that he's starting to rebuild Gaza and the Middle East, doing agreements between Israel and Saudi, etc. All of them are totally in reach. The only force that actually preventing is Israel. And Hamas, but Hamas is not, Hamas is the enemy, and we know how to beat him with army. But there is like all the political sphere that is asking Israel for the same thing. So definitely the schedule, the American schedule, is determining the Israeli schedule. Plus the fact that we have hostages, 134 hostages for 166 days under the ground, and every day for them is like years, and we have to solve it.
You've mentioned Benny Gantz, and according to the polls, Benny Gantz would be the winner were Israel to have early elections. Do you think he is the leader the country needs right now?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so first of all, any leader that will not be Benjamin Netanyahu and will not be related to his previous government will be welcomed by the Israeli people. I think we went so low with the quality of our leadership that any person can do the job, definitely Benny Gantz. Gantz can definitely be the next prime minister, and he can do a very good job.
As we speak, the Haaretz headlines reads, Israel's return to Al-Shifa proves that Hamas is far from, once again. As we speak, the headlines here from Haaretz are the following. Israel's return to Al-Shifa proves that Hamas is far from surrendering in northern Gaza. What do you make of it?
Hamas is a concept. It's a belief. Anybody that thinks that you can destroy ID and I believe is wrong. You can't. It's a faith. For that you need to use education, and it takes a decade. So this part of Hamas will always stay alive. Now, the Hamas personnel themselves, once they drop their guns and they just dress like normal other people, they can move around in Gaza. And they are, especially if they are not senior, you will not recognize them. And there, we know there's weapons everywhere in Gaza. So in the reality, it's true. Israel does not sit right now in the center of Gaza. We sit mainly around the border and on the line that crosses, cuts Gaza between north and south, which definitely allows Hamas people to go in. But I actually don't see it as a threat, because whatever will be the arrangement in Gaza, it's very clear that from security point of view, Israel will stay involved. So in order to eradicate terror, you can do it in 2 months or 6 months or even in 2 years. You need to go and chase them. And I think the operation that we saw yesterday at the hospital is exactly that. Once you are there, you have intelligence, you have accurate intelligence. When you have accurate intelligence, you send special forces and you either arrest or kill the terrorists that are there. So we had a similar situation in the West Bank with the suicide bombers, when Ariel Sharon launched the operation that took probably 6 months to kind of build a wall and end this thing. But this is an ongoing war that we're doing even today to try to find the people that are involved in terrorism, and we'll have to do the same thing in Gaza. It's unavoidable. So it is tricky. Israel will always have to be involved in this. By the way, in a very similar way to the way we are involved in other places. So I'll just try to give you an example. Let's say we see now that there is a terrorist operation happening in Cyprus. I'm inventing this one. It's not real. If we see that something like this happen, we will contact the Cypriot authorities and say, hey, this is the situation, eliminated. And if not, we might do it ourselves. I think this is like a very clean situation between countries. And I think what we'll see with Gaza is an evolution from Israel taking full control over the security. Slowly, we'll see other Arab security forces taking over, like the Egyptians, etc. And slowly, hopefully, there will be a Palestinian force there that can do the job. And if not, Israel will have to do it. If there's something that's very clear after October 7 is that we will not allow we will not leave controlling the security in Gaza for other people.
And do you worry about the humanitarian consequences of a large military operation in Rafah?
So first of all, where we see our humanitarian crisis is actually in northern Gaza, where you see when you see that there is a lack of food, hunger, and this needs to be fixed, and ASAP, and it's being fixed right now. Finally, the Israeli government understood that we need to deal with that, and I think this the humanitarian crisis in northern Gaza, mainly related to food right now, will be solved. When you look at Rafah, it is impossible to operate in Rafah in a big scale without evacuating the population. Now, it doesn't mean that you need to put 1 million people on trucks and send them somewhere else. This is not practical as well. I think in reality, and again, this depends if the US will support it and how they will support it. I think what you'll see that certain parts of the city are being evacuated, mainly because there are tunnels underneath them, actually to protect the population. They will be evacuated somewhere. This area will be so-called clean, and then people will be allowed to go back there. It's very complicated. I believe that Israel will do everything in our power to prevent hurting the civilian population. It means that it will be very, very slow, but it needs to be done. But I don't fear the humanitarian crisis in Rafah as much as other people do. I mainly fear the humanitarian crisis in places that are so-called clean. But then if you are not trying to build a proper environment, then there you create a chaos, and that's what we saw in northern Gaza.
What about the scenario up in the north? Is the tension between the IDF and Hezbollah escalating towards war?
Okay, so the situation north of Israel is very, very tricky. Now let's ignore Hezbollah and Lebanon for a second, and let's speak about the Israelis. people that live in close proximity to the Lebanese border, they see what happened in October 7, and they know that the same thing can happen to them again as well. So in order to restore trust within people, you need to change the government, change the way we operate the IDF, and provide a feeling of security to the people in the north. And this is, again, it's not related to anything that's happening across the border. Now, across the border, we have few scenarios. One scenario is that this conflict will deepen and deepen, and something will happen. Let's say one of the Hezbollah rockets hits a bus in Haifa. And then, without anybody wanting it, you will see a full-blown war all over Israel and over Lebanon. I don't think the Lebanese want that. I don't think Hezbollah wants it. I don't think Iran wants that. Honestly, I don't think anybody wants it. But it is a possibility. Therefore, we need to come to a place of a ceasefire as soon as possible. If there will not be a situation of a ceasefire, Israel will have to strike and start a war in Lebanon. I truly hope it will not happen. But it's very different than Gaza, because nobody will go and conquer the entire Lebanon and get Hezbollah out, etc. This is not realistic. What needs to happen there is that Lebanon will comply with the 1701 resolution of the UN, that no armed forces should be south of the Litani bridge. And this is internal in Israel. If in the past we thought that we can protect, 100 towns and villages with 500 soldiers and 2 planes, I think we need to start operating completely different way. But that's on our hand, and we'll have to do the same thing in Gaza, and we'll have to do it the same thing in everywhere. But that's our problem. So I truly hope there will not be a war in Lebanon. I do think it's preventable.
As for the West Bank, Ramadan is a huge concern for many people. What do you make of the situation there so far?
So before we speak about the West Bank, let's actually talk about the Arab population, the Muslim population, the Palestinian population within Israel, that since the beginning of the war are behaving in like the most, like in a wonderful way. We didn't see any tension, nothing that happened between the Israeli-Palestinian population, the Jewish population, despite even the extreme right people in the Israeli government that were trying to pull violence between the Palestinians and the Israelis within Israel. And actually, I salute them. Like my Palestinian and my Arab friends in Israel, I really salute them for understanding that what Hamas did have nothing to do with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and it was like a brutal group of terrorists performing a massacre. And I think, if anything you can say about the Palestinians in Israel is that they were ashamed by this, and they didn't want to be associated, and that's actually a great opportunity for Israel. Now, if you move into the West Bank, in the West Bank, we have a Palestinian Authority that is dysfunctional, or almost dysfunctional, a very big support for Hamas, but our security, the Israeli security forces, have never left the area, and they're working very well there to eliminate terror. It is a very conflicted area, regardless of Ramadan. We saw in the last days since Ramadan started that actually the Palestinians that came to Al-Aqsa Mosque were again behaving extremely well. I believe the situation there is under control because of a lot of work of the Israeli security forces. I think that a lot of people, most of the Palestinian people in the West Bank do not want the West Bank to look like Gaza. And that's actually a general statement. I think from very dark places. So, generally speaking, in a very dark place where we are right now as Israeli and Palestinians, wonderful things can happen. I think when you see the atrocities of war, of massacre, etc., a lot of people on one hand, they become like racist and mad on the other side, and they hate the other side. But also down below, they do understand the atrocities of war, and it is an opportunity to promote. I don't want to say peace, but I will say less violence. And I think we will actually see some of it. And I think the West Bank is a good example. We do need to allow for the creation of a Palestinian Authority organization that can actually manage both the West Bank and Gaza. And again, hopefully, with the trauma that we all just faced, this will allow for the creation of something that is very powerful and sustainable for both Israel and Palestinians.
Out of curiosity, are you a reservist? How did the aftermath of October the 7th affect your personal and professional life?
So no, I'm actually too old. I'm 51-year-old, so I was not drafted. It is impacting the people that are need to serve in the army in a very dramatic way. They need to serve more time, etc. Lots of my friends, family, my two daughters are being drafted this year to the army. They're like 18 and 19. So it does touch each and one of us. But this is part of being Israeli. I don't think we know where we live. We know the environment. We are used to the fact we are used to anti-Semitism. We know that we need to protect ourselves. It was like this before the massacre, before the wars, and sadly, it will be like this for many, many years, definitely after my time. And part of it is serving in the Israeli army, and it's just like part of life. I see it as a great honor to be able to protect my country, nothing else.
You describe yourself in your X account, I mean the former Twitter, as father of three and as someone fighting for Israeli democracy. How intertwined are both things? How important is to keep Israel a democratic country for future generations, including your children?
Well, if Israel will not be, we are very close to Passover. And in Passover, the story of Passover, when they are becoming when they are becoming free, the concept of a nation becoming free. This is what being Jewish is all about. And being free is being democratic. When you live in a totalitarian environment, we saw it before, you're not free. So for most Israelis, or for the productive, for the techies, for the people that actually drive this country, living in a non-democratic country is not an option. And when I say democratic, I mean like fully democratic. Because eventually you're talking about very smart people, very talented people. They can easily go and live in San Francisco or in Palo Alto or in Sweden. Everybody will want them because they're very, very capable and drive economies. But we all want to be here. We want to be here because we love our country. But the condition is that the country needs to be democratic. So the entire fight for democracy that we've been doing for a year before the massacre was all about that. And we were actually warning the government, and even the generals were warning the government that if they will dissolve the Israeli democracy, they're putting the country on a tremendous risk, and they did, and we saw the result. So it's totally related. For me, Israel needs to be free, liberal, equal. I always say that we should be like a symbol for the world, what freedom and democracy should be about, and we show it. We managed to build in a very hostile area with no natural resources, one of the most successful countries on planet Earth. We did it because of those things, the way Israel was established. And we will continue doing so because that's the only way. So those things are completely interlined, and I should move to another place here.
Ami, toda rabá, Hazak ve'emat.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So, Obrigada a vocês também pela audiência e até a próxima.